They told you she was a prostitute. But what if that was the biggest cover-up in Christian history? What if the woman we were taught to pity was actually the woman Jesus trusted the most? Not just a follower, not just a witness, but the one he revealed the deepest spiritual truths to after his resurrection. Her name was Mary Magdalene, and her gospel was buried for nearly 2,000 years. It was hidden and dismissed as heresy, not because it lacked truth, but because it held too much of it. In 1896, a faded papyrus was discovered in Egypt. It contained what is now known as the Gospel of Mary, a forgotten text unlike anything in the Bible. No fire and brimstone, no fear, just wisdom. In it, Mary doesn't just speak, she teaches. She comforts the grieving disciples. She explains the soul's journey beyond death. And she delivers a message so spiritually liberating, so radically mystical. The early church labeled it a threat, because if Mary was not a fallen woman, but a prophet, perhaps even the apostle to the apostles, then everything changes. It means the church wasn't built on Peter alone. It means divine truth is not confined to masculine authority. And it means the divine feminine, the nurturing, intuitive, soul-centered power, was once central to spiritual life, until it was erased. This isn't just about history. This is about what's missing in the world today, about the imbalance we all feel, when half the soul of humanity is silenced. So what does her gospel actually say? What truth was Mary Magdalene entrusted with that made her such a danger? And what does it reveal about the divine feminine and the future of spiritual awakening? Stay with me, because once you hear what was hidden in her words, you'll never see the story of Jesus the same way again. Before she was twisted into a symbol of sin, Mary Magdalene was one of the most important figures in early Christianity. She was present at the crucifixion, and she was the first to witness the resurrection. And according to several non-canonical texts, including the Gospel of Mary, she understood Jesus' teachings in a way that no one else did. But somewhere along the way, she disappeared. Her name was not removed entirely, that would have been too suspicious. But instead, her reputation was rewritten. By the 6th century, a single sermon by Pope Gregory the Great would fuse her identity with that of a nameless, sinful woman from another passage in Luke. And just like that, Mary Magdalene, teacher, mystic, and perhaps even spiritual successor to Christ, was reduced to a cautionary tale, a reformed harlot, a symbol of the fallen woman who could only be saved through male forgiveness. But the early Gnostic texts tell a far different story. In the Gospel of Mary, which was discovered in fragments in the late 1800s, she wasn't silent, she doesn't kneel, but she leads. After Jesus' death, while the male disciples are afraid, confused, and uncertain, it is Mary who comforts them. It is Mary who claims to have received secret teachings from the risen Christ. And it is Mary who explains to them that true salvation isn't external, it's within. That the soul's journey isn't about punishment and reward, but about releasing the attachments of the lower self and returning to our divine origin. These weren't just gentle ideas. In the context of Roman power, patriarchal priesthood, and an emerging church structure built on hierarchy and control, Mary's message was dangerous. It suggested that inner knowing was more powerful than institutional obedience. That spiritual authority was not just granted to men, that there was a feminine pathway to God, an intuitive, loving, and mystical pathway that had been there all along. And so, like many other texts that didn't fit the official story, her gospel was excluded from the canon, until it began resurfacing in the late 19th and 20th centuries, in dusty archives, in fragments preserved by chance or divine timing. And now, it's speaking again. As we enter an age hungry for balance, for healing, for the sacred union of masculine and feminine within us all, the voice of Mary Magdalene is rising, not to replace the story of Jesus, but to complete it. In the next part of this video, we'll explore the actual contents of the Gospel of Mary, line by line, and uncover the wisdom that was meant for a future generation. When most people think of Gospels, they think of the four in the Bible: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But the Gospel of Mary is something entirely different. It's not a chronological biography. It doesn't try to document miracles or fulfill prophecy. It's a conversation. A mystical dialogue between Jesus and Mary, and then between Mary and the grieving disciples set after the resurrection. The surviving text, written in Coptic and translated from Greek, is only partially preserved. In fact, 6 of the first pages are missing along with 4 in the middle. But what we do have begins in the middle of a teaching, where Jesus is speaking to his disciples about the nature of reality. And from the very start, it's clear this gospel isn't concerned with rituals, churches, or laws. Jesus says, all natures, all formations, all creatures exist in and with one another, and they will be resolved again into their own roots. For the nature of matter is resolved into the roots of its own nature alone. These are deeply mystical words. He's speaking not about sin and punishment, but about the unity of creation, the return to source, and the impermanence of the physical world. Then he tells the disciples, let no one lead you astray saying, lo here, or lo there. For the Son of Man is within you. Follow after him. Those who seek him will find him. This is the central spiritual message of the Gospel of Mary, and exactly what made it so threatening. That the kingdom of God, the Christ, the divine, it's not somewhere outside you. It's within. Within your soul. Within your silence. Within your own experience of divine truth. After this final teaching, Jesus departs, not with a flash of light or ascension, but with a profound silence. The disciples are left shaken. They asked what they were to do now. And it's Mary Magdalene who steps forward. She comforts them, reminding them that the Savior's grace is always with them, and tells them not to let fear rule their hearts. It's in this moment, not Peter, not Thomas, but Mary becomes the center of spiritual strength. Then she reveals something extraordinary. She says that during a vision, Jesus appeared to her and gave her a deeper, secret teaching, one about the soul's journey after death. The disciples are stunned. Some are inspired. Others, not so much. In her vision, the soul must ascend through 4 powers or layers of illusion that bind us to suffering. These are often interpreted as metaphors for darkness, desire, ignorance, wrath of the flesh. At each level, the soul is questioned and challenged. Mary explains that the soul overcomes these powers by letting go, not through force or punishment, but through knowledge of the true self and freedom from attachments. This is radical. Not only does it deny the need for priests or sacrifices, it bypasses institutional religion entirely. It's a mystical roadmap to liberation, and it comes not from a man, but from a woman. When Mary finishes recounting her vision, something shocking happens. Peter, the same apostle the church would later name its rock and foundation, challenges her. He says, did he really speak with a woman in private, and not openly to us? Are we to turn around and all listen to her? Did he prefer her to us? This isn't just doubt. It's a confrontation with ego, hierarchy, and gender bias. Peter's challenge reveals a power struggle, one that would shape Christianity for centuries. But then Levi, another disciple, defends her. If the Savior made her worthy, who are you to reject her? He says Jesus knew her well and that she is worthy of respect. This moment is powerful, a mirror of what would play out later on a grander scale. Mary's authority was acknowledged by some, but rejected by the power structures that would go on to define mainstream Christianity. In Mary's gospel, we don't just find alternate theology. We find a restoration of the divine feminine, not as an abstract idea, but as a living, breathing presence within the heart of Jesus' story. Her teachings emphasizes inner wisdom over external control, self-liberation through direct knowing, the sacred union of masculine and feminine, the soul's return to its original state of purity and light. These aren't just Gnostic ideas. They echo what mystics, shamans, and spiritual teachers across cultures have long known, that the soul's liberation comes from within, and that the feminine is not weak, but deeply wise. And maybe that's why her gospel had to be buried. Not because it wasn't true, but because it was too true. To understand why Mary Magdalene's voice was buried, we have to go even further back than the early church, because this isn't just about one woman. It's about a spiritual archetype that has been both revered and rejected throughout history. Long before the rise of patriarchal religions, across the ancient world, from Mesopotamia to Egypt, from India to the British Isles, the divine feminine was central to spiritual life. She was Inanna, Isis, Hathor, Shakti, Sophia, the Great Mother. She was fertility and destruction, wisdom and compassion, the dark womb and the radiant light. These goddesses weren't secondary to male deities, they were equal, sometimes even supreme. Temples were built in their honor. Priestesses held positions of spiritual and political power. The feminine was not seen as sinful or weak, but as sacred, mysterious, and life-giving. But something changed. As empires grew, hierarchies solidified, and with them came a shift in religious structure. Away from nature, away from balance, and toward power and control. Monotheism rose. And with it came male-only priesthoods, male gods, and the notion that women were spiritually inferior. The goddess became a demon. The priestess became a witch. And the body, especially the female body, became something to be feared and suppressed. In this climate, a woman like Mary Magdalene, a woman who spoke of the soul, of gnosis and of love, a woman who had the audacity to be seen as a spiritual equal to Jesus, had to be erased. The early church fathers weren't just debating theology. They were building a structure, an institution, with hierarchy, rules, and authority. And authority depends on control. What Mary represented wasn't controllable. Her gospel says the kingdom is within, that we don't need temples, rituals, or religious intermediaries, that salvation is not bought with fear, but remembered through love, that it is not just radical, that's revolutionary. If that message had survived intact, if her teachings had been canonized, Christianity as we know it today might look entirely different. We might have had a tradition that honors intuition, that embraces emotional wisdom, that sees the body and the earth as sacred. The divine feminine isn't about gender, it's about balance. But let's be clear, the divine feminine is not about women being better than men. It's not about flipping the hierarchy. It's about restoring balance. Every human being, regardless of gender, carries both masculine and feminine energies. The divine masculine is structure, clarity, and action. The divine feminine is intuition, creation, and compassion. And for thousands of years we've been out of balance, overvaluing logic over feeling, domination over harmony, and conquest over connection. That imbalance shows up everywhere. In how we treat the earth, in how we raise our children, in how we relate to our bodies, and in how we treat each other. The silencing of Mary Magdalene wasn't just about theology. It was part of a much larger silencing of the soul's feminine voice, the part of us that listens instead of commands, that nurtures instead of conquers, that knows instead of proves. Across the world, we are witnessing the return of the divine feminine, in ancient texts being rediscovered, in the rise of women's voices, in the spiritual hunger of a world tired of fear-based religion and yearning for wholeness. Mary Magdalene is returning, not just in books and gospels, but as an inner presence, in the hearts of those ready to reclaim the sacredness of being. Her story is our story. Her erasure is our forgetting. Her resurrection is our awakening. And when we finally listen to her words, not just with our minds, but with our souls, we begin to restore something much greater than history. We begin to restore ourselves. Up until now, we've uncovered a hidden history, a buried gospel, a suppressed feminine voice. But history is only half the story, because Mary Magdalene's gospel wasn't just meant to be read, it was meant to be lived. At the core of her teachings is something rare and powerful, a spirituality not based on fear or dogma, but on direct inner knowing, what the ancient Gnostics called gnosis, not knowledge of the mind but wisdom of the soul. And that's what Mary offered, a path to spiritual liberation through awakening what is already within you. One of the most repeated themes in her gospel, and in Jesus's private teachings to her, is that salvation is not external. Do not look outside yourself, the text implies. The Son of Man is within. Follow him there. It's a revolutionary message. especially today, when we're constantly told to look outside ourselves for validation, success, or salvation. Mary's teachings reminds us, the temple is not a building. The truth is not a dogma. The Christ is not a statue or a system. It is within the stillness of your being, within your capacity to love without condition, within your own sacred silence. And to connect with that inner Christ, you must first trust yourself again. That's the first key to living her wisdom. Begin a relationship with your own inner guidance. Listen to the whispers of your intuition, the sacred feminine within. That's where the voice of Christ still speaks. In Mary's vision of the soul's journey after death, she describes how the soul must pass through 4 challenges, powers that attempt to pull it back down into forgetfulness and attachment. These aren't just poetic ideas. They're psychological and emotional truths. In modern terms, we might call them fear, addiction, ego, and false identity. Each of us in life passes through these same challenges. We are tempted to stay in the roles we've been assigned, to let pain define us, to believe we are only what the world sees. But Mary's gospel says, the soul can rise. It rises through detachment, not in a cold or distant way, but by recognizing that the ego's grip is not the final truth. Her teaching is this: you are not the voice of your trauma. You are not the body of your suffering. You are not the fears that have shaped you. You are a spark of something far beyond this world. And to live her teaching is to begin the process of release. Forgive what's behind you. Detach from what drains you. Or reclaim what's sacred in you. The most striking thing about Mary's gospel is its tone. It's not angry. It's not obsessed with punishment, damnation, or divine wrath. It's gentle and clear. It is rooted in love. After Jesus leaves and the disciples are grieving, it's Mary's compassion that brings them back to strength. That is the divine feminine in action, not competing or proving, simply holding sacred space. The way forward in this world, especially today, isn't through more judgment or more fear. It's through the frequency of love, not passive love, not love that denies truth, but active and embodied love that recognizes the sacred in all things. To live her teaching is to lead not from control, but from compassion, from presence, from the knowing that your very being is a bridge between the earthly and the divine. One of the most powerful moments in her gospel is when she stands her ground in front of Peter. He challenges her and dismisses her authority. But Mary doesn't crumble. She doesn't argue. She simply speaks her truth. That is called spiritual maturity. That's what it means to carry sacred authority. In a world that rewards loudness, aggression, and status, Mary shows us a different kind of power. One rooted in truth, not in dominance. To live that today is to stop asking for permission to be whole. You don't need approval to speak your truth. You don't need a title to be wise. You don't need to be validated to walk your path. Just like Mary, your authority begins the moment you remember who you are. So how do you live this now? Start small. Not with more information, but with intention. Create moments in your day to listen inwardly. Name one attachment or belief that is keeping you stuck, and begin to release it. Practice unconditional compassion, even in moments where judgment arises. Write down the parts of yourself you've been told to suppress, and speak them into existence. This is how we resurrect her gospel. Not by waiting for institutions to approve it, but by embodying it. And through you, the divine feminine remembers herself. This isn't just about a gospel, or even about Mary Magdalene herself. It's about a memory returning to the human soul. A memory of a time when wisdom didn't wear a collar, when truth wasn't filtered through fear, when the sacred wasn't divided into masculine or feminine, but was known as a living, breathing presence within all things. Mary's re-emergence in our collective consciousness is not accidental. It's not just historical curiosity. It's a spiritual signal, a sign that something is shifting, both within us and around us. Look around. Anxiety is rising. Depression is common. Disconnection is everywhere. People are spiritually starving even when surrounded by religion. For centuries, we've been taught to value logic over emotion, action over contemplation, achievement over presence. We've forgotten how to feel, how to rest in the quiet knowing that we are already enough. This is what the divine feminine comes to heal, not by replacing the masculine, but by balancing it. When Mary's gospel was buried, it wasn't just to silence a woman, it was to silence a way of knowing, a way of connecting to God through silence, intuition, tenderness, and direct experience. But the soul remembers, and across the world we're seeing that remembrance take shape. More people are turning inward. Meditation, energy healing, and mysticism are on the rise. The hunger for the feminine side of God is becoming undeniable. Her voice is returning through dreams, through visions, through books and music and art. Through you and through me. And perhaps that's the real resurrection we've been waiting for. Not just of Christ, but of the part of ourselves we were told to bury. The return of Mary Magdalene signals a new era. Not a religion, not a system, but a reclamation of soul. A spirituality that doesn't punish, but liberates. That doesn't divide, but integrates. That doesn't demand obedience, but invites inner authority. Her message speaks to all who have ever felt unseen. To all who were told their voice didn't matter, their feelings were too much, their wisdom was irrelevant. Mary is for the misfits. For those who feel that truth lives not in sermons, but in the quiet knowing inside the heart. So what do we do with this? The answer is simple but not easy. Remember. Remember the part of you that was never broken. The part of you that knew how to love without fear. The part of you that has always been connected to the divine, even when the world told you otherwise. Speak what's in your heart. Listen for what's beneath the noise. Trust your own experience of truth. And maybe most importantly, stop waiting for permission to walk the sacred path that's already beneath your feet. Mary Magdalene's story isn't over. It's just beginning. Every time someone dares to love with full presence, every time someone reclaims their voice, every time someone turns inward and finds God not in the sky, but in the silence, she lives again. The Gospel of Mary wasn't buried by accident. It was buried because it contained the power to wake us up. To remind us that truth isn't something handed down, it's something to be remembered. If this message stirred something in you, something deep, ancient, and unexplainable, that's not an accident. That's her voice, speaking through time, reminding you of who you are. Share this video, spread her words, and let's bring the divine feminine back, not just in religion, but in the way we live.